Hello everyone, welcome to this demo on how to create a postcard. Let me start by saying that depending on what printer you go to, they might have different guidelines for what are the dimensions of your document. So if you're going to go in the future and print some of your postcards, just make sure that you go to their website or you visit them, because most of the time they have a template that you can work on, so that way you are guaranteed that the print will not cut out any of your design. So be aware of that what I'm going to talk about today is more about the design and some of the basic, standard sizes. But again, depending on the printer, they might have templates or specifics, sizing that you need to follow. So we're going to do a postcard, very basic one, 4x6. Or we can do it 5x7. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to pick 4x6 for now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to File up here, and I'm going to create a new document. And once I'm here, there's a lot of options on the top when you're creating a new document. You have photo, print. Like if you go to print, it will have letter size and things like that. I'm just going to do it manually and enter the exact dimension that I want. So for this assignment, I'm going to write the width. I want my postcard to be horizontal or landscape. So I'm going to write 6.25. Okay, so that's going to be how long my postcard is going to be. The reality is that when I send to print it, it's going to end up being 4x6. But that 0.25 is basically a bleed. So that way the printer can cut without getting too inside or too outside of our design. It gives us a safety area. So now for the height, I'm going to do 4.25, which will translate, both of these dimensions are going to translate into 0.125, because basically one side would be 0.125 and the other side will take the other 0.125 and making the 0.25. Makes sense, right? So let's go ahead and click create. And this is our first document. We're going to have to do two, because one is going to be the front or the cover, and then the other one is going to be the back. So I'm going to start designing this one because I'm going to duplicate it after I do the guidelines. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can see a little bit better the image. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that you have first the rulers open. Right now you see my rulers on the top and the left, but if I press Command R, they will go away. Okay, so the first thing that you need to make sure is that you have the rulers open. So I'm going to do Command R, and it will show up my rulers. And from the rulers, you can pull out guidelines. And if I go here and I pull it out, you can see there's a cyan line that moves across my screen here. Now, these are guidelines that do not print. So I have to make that clear. This is just for Photoshop. Once you save this and send it to the printer, this blue cyan line is not going to come out. Okay, so these are basically repositionable. You can move them around. So if you hover over it, it changes to this symbol and you can just drag it. Now, if you want to get rid of them, you can basically just do that same thing, but drag it all the way to the ruler again, and then they go away. Okay, and you have the same on the other side right here, vertical guides. So, okay, so you have that and you have that, and you can do as many as you want. I have done a lot. I don't know if there's a limit. I'm guessing there might be at some point, but I've done a lot of guides and I have never ran out of the possibility of making one. So that's a good news. So guides can, be very helpful when you're creating things. You can use them basically as a safety, so you know where not to pass. You can also have the possibility, if you're doing, for example, this, it will snap to it. If you're doing a selection, or if you have an image, it will basically snap to it. Okay, so it's pretty useful because it makes you, have things really symmetrical and organized within your document. Okay, so now I'm going to show you a little trick right now, because what I want you to do is make sure that you have the guides where you want them. Of course, we have a ruler here, and even though like moving it here, it seems like it would be perfect, it's never quite. I just did that right there, and if I zoom in, I'm going to zoom into that guide, you can see that it didn't quite align here. I'm going to try to zoom in here so you can see it, but the guide is a little bit off. It's a little bit to the left from that line. So That works, if you don't need precision. But if you want precision, you want to do it by the numbers. This has a little preview that they kind of snap to it. They have improved this and now it works, but I still don't trust it. I want to make sure that it's the right amount. Also, because you have all these little lines here, and sometimes you're looking at it like thinking, oh, yeah, this is like the 1/4, but then you realize, oh, wait, that's not it. So to prevent, errors, it's better to do it by the numbers. So I'm going to take all these guides away. Okay, so let's drag them up. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to zoom out so it's not too bright. I'm going to go to View on the top, and then right on the bottom here, you have New Guide. Okay. So once you have this new window that comes open, you have both horizontal or vertical. And you can put any position here for this. Okay, so I told you that we did 0.25, right? But you know that because it's 1.25 in one side and 1.25 the other side, I have to put that here. So the vertical one, that's going to be right here on this area, right? It's going to be at 0.125, okay? So that's my first guide right there. So now we have to do the other side right over here. So we have to subtract, right, the 0.125 from 6.25, which is at the edge right here. So I'm going to go to View, New Guide, and on my vertical, I'm going to put 6.125, right? Because it was originally, the document is 6.25, right? So it's not 6 exactly, right? It's just a little bit bigger, and that will give us basically the same gap on both sides. The same thing we have to do for the horizontal. So I'm going to go here, New Guide. Now I'm going to switch it and click horizontal. Press OK. Oh, I got too excited. New Guide. I forgot that I needed to write the 0.125. There we go. And now it will be right here. Now I do it again. So I go to View, New Guide. And remember that this one is 4.25. So I have to do 4.125. And then boom. So now basically I have these guides right here is what is going to be cut. Okay. So when I send it to the printer, they usually require you to have this extra 1.25 because they have these machines that cut your cards, right? And it's a little bit sometimes off, but very tiny, but they want to make sure that you have that extra space. So the rule, the rule that they have usually is that you don't want anything that matters, right, beyond this point or 0.125 neither to this side. So the way that I do it, you don't have to do this part, but the way that I do it, I usually go here and do another guide. And now I add on the vertical 0.25. Okay, and I do this all around just because, so the vertical will be 6. I think it's the other one. Yep. And then View, New Guide, horizontal, and I do 0.25. And then on this one, View, New Guide, and I do here 4 should be it. Yeah. Okay. So this is what I end up with. So I want to show you, let's do it with the rectangular tool. Let's change it to color so that way you can see what I'm doing. And let's do fill. Let's do that. And then stroke. I don't need a stroke. And I'm just going to do a little, rectangle here so you can see what I mean. So basically what you want is to be able to, anything that matters to you, for example, type or anything that should not be cut by any chance, you don't want to pass this line right here. Okay, remember that the one that's going to be cut, let me zoom in, is the first one. Okay, this one right here. Right now, this one is like as a safety. So you want to make sure that you don't go beyond this if it matters. Now, that doesn't mean that if you want an image to go bleed all the way to the edge, you definitely want to pass this one and that one. Okay, so if I want this blue to actually appear in the entire postcard, then I need to make sure that my blue actually goes beyond these 2 lines all the way to the edge like this, right? Because when they cut it, it will guarantee you that it's going to be blue at the edge. Okay, Now, if I don't want that blue at the edge and, it's not important, I just want like something like that, that's fine if you want a little white line around it. Um, so that's basically what that matters, this area here. So this right here is the first basic step that you have to do. You have to have this design. Sometimes, if you want, I go to view and I go to new guide. Something, this is like a trick that not a lot of people know, but you can also, besides what it says here, you can put a percentage number. So if you put horizontal and you put 50 and then the percent symbol, it will basically throw you a line right in the middle. So you don't have to make the math. So it's a lot better when you want like a quick line. So a sample new guide, you can do vertical and do 50 and then percent, and then boom. You don't need this one. Sometimes I like to have it, but in this case, I don't think that you should have it because you're going to be designing this and you can have these lines on the way. Now, there's a cool shortcut that you can do to hide them when you're working, so that way they don't distract you too much. And it's command and the semicolon, and then they go away. And you can reappear them if you do command and semicolon. Okay, so that's the one right next to the L key in your keyboard. Okay, so you can turn it off or turn it on. I'm actually going to take these two out. Now that I have this, because you don't want to redo the whole thing again, you're going to go to image, okay, and then duplicate, and you're going to put here, back or whatever name. I'm going to put back for now so I know which one is the front and which one is the back. So now I have the front and now I have the back. Okay, so I'm going to start with the front. So I'm not going to go over all the techniques on typing because we have covered some of those. I just want to point a couple other things that I didn't went over before. So once you select your type, this is awesome. Oh my gosh. Once you select your type, let's do this a little bit bigger like that. Okay, so once you do your type and you have the layer selected, I'm going to bring my layer panel here so you can see it better. You have this FX symbol right here. You see it? I'm highlighting it right now so you can see it. So that FX symbol, if you click on it, you can basically select all these tools right here. You can select, let's say, a drop shadow. Okay, now you have a drop shadow. Now the cool thing about these layer styles is that if you have them here, you can hide them, show them, you can double click the word and remodify them. Okay, so they're kind of smart in the sense that they keep memory of the settings, and you can go back at them and rechange it or delete them if you want. So this is pretty cool. And you can, once you have this window open, even though that it can look intimidating, there's a lot of stuff. You can keep adding stuff by just going through them. So for example, I can add, let's say, a stroke and do a check mark, but then I'm still in the view of drop shadow. Right now, this is a lot of people get confused with this and they close it and reopen it because they click the check mark, but you have to actually click on the word here. So then changes the view of that setting. Okay, so now I'm in the stroke and you can decide how much stroke you want. Obviously that was way too much. But you can do something like this where you add a stroke. I'm going to, you can add texture if you want. It's hard to see, but it's there. Oh, I just did what I told you not to do, but let's do depth so you can see it more. So that's like the texture that shows up there. So you can play with this and really get a lot out of your type by just doing these effects. And you can see that the list of the things that I check are right here. So you can take off the visibility of some of them if you want. Okay, so it's pretty awesome. So there's unlimited possibilities of what you can do here. I'm not going to go over all of them because I think it's going to be more particular in what you're looking for. The standard ones that people use a lot is like, stroke or drop shadow. So let me explain a little bit about these. Let's go to the drop shadow just to explain one of them. Blending mode, you can leave it on the basic one. If you do it normal, it will be basically a black blob. You can change basically the color, and that's something that people think that, oh, it's a drop shadow, but you can do any color you want. Your drop shadow can be red. You can see it now that it's red here. You can change the opacity if it's going to be like completely, red or lower. And this blending mode behaves similar to what we covered before on the layers. So when you have it on multiply, basically it's not going to be completely um, red. It's going to be basically like a diffusion combination with the background. Um, so just be aware of that you can put it higher and it might not be completely, dark, and it's because it's on multiply. Okay, you can change also the direction. Let me zoom in on this window. Sometimes my mouse get double when I'm zooming, so I don't like zooming in too much. But if I go here to this window, you have the distance. Let's look over here so you can see the difference, right? You can get that to be really, separated from it. I would be careful with that. You don't want to like over exaggerate it unless you really need it. You can change the spread. Let's put it black again. It looks kind of weird on red. You can change the spread, that you can see how that looks, the size, how big it is. It can get kind of soft. Like if you want it like very, sharp, you can do that too if you reduce the size. So those are like some of the, options that you have. You have also like the contour, how it behaves. I usually leave it on the basic one. And the noise, if you want to add noise to it, you can see on the bottom here that it adds some noise. So you can do some cool things with this too. So those are some of the options just for the drop shadow. So you can tell that if I go through all of these, it's going to be crazy. So most of the time it's something that you're looking for. So if you're looking for some bevel and emboss, because you want your type to have, let me take out the stroke and the texture so it's more visible. We covered this one briefly, I think last time, but you can also, I did the same thing. Change the depth. You see now it looks like it's more two-dimensional. So you can play with that here to make it pop a little bit more. Now, these effects, you have to be careful. If you really look at design and things that people do, most of the time the type is kind of flat unless it needs, because of the design, like a lot of texture and, it needs all that, bling to kind of like pop. But most of the time you don't need any of these things for your type. If you look at, if you start paying attention to posters and postcards, most of the time they're just like basic like this because it seems more classy, right? If you start putting a lot of stuff in it, it starts looking like somebody did it on a Word document or something like that, or some weird program. So you can definitely use them. I have used them, but you have to be intentional in how you're using it and for what is the design. Okay, so that's really key when you're doing this. Some other things that we can go over. Let's go to window and let's open a paragraph and character here. I think we covered this briefly, but I just want to point it out again. Some of the options that you have. When you're selecting the type tool, if you click and drag, you have a box. Okay, so it will have your text inside of it and you can align it to the left, okay, to the center or to the right, similar than a Word document. You can change the spacing, the font type here under character. You can also do it up here. It's the same thing. And up here you also have, let's do this on the left. And I'm going to click on this is awesome. And I'm going to make it just so you can see how the warp text. Let's say you want to do like a warp on that, like an arc. So that's what you can do with this. And you have all these possibilities. You can get kind of crazy with this. You can go through them. And one of the cool things about this one is that you can also modify it. It's not like what you see is what you get. You can also bend it less if you want. Like if you want to do something subtle like this, you don't want to do it that much, you can lower it here. You can change the distortion too. You can see that's kind of squeezing here and going bigger here. So you can play with that, and also the vertical one. So these are really cool options that you can go and play with. Let's move it. Let's pray okay, so you can see it on the top. So you can kind of play with this and modify your type. The cool thing about doing any of these adjustments is that you have them here and you can replay with them. You don't have to rasterize your type. You can actually go back and change it. So that's a really cool thing that you can do for this. So that's basically an introduction of some things that I didn't mention last time that I want to make sure that you know how to do. Um, but all the things that you need are basically going to be under character, paragraph. If you don't see these windows, just make sure you go to a window and make sure that you have the check marks here, characters on the top and paragraph. So you have these two options. And once you have the type tool selected, so I've just pressed the T and I have the type tool selected, this many of the top changes, you can also do that here. And you can open, the warp text, and you can go back to none. Okay. And you can also pop this window by just clicking here. So if you don't see it, you can click here and it will pop open. You have also 3D that you can make your type 3D. I don't play with this that much because I never really need it to do like 3D text, but you can get really crazy with this, right? Because you have like all these capabilities of doing this like perspective change to it. I don't think we need it for this right now, but I just want to point it out that it's there in case you really want to play with it. You can kind of go in here and play with the settings on the right side here under properties. So it's pretty cool. There might be a design that you maybe want to do, and you can see that you can rotate the text. And once you get it, you can approve it. So it's kind of cool. It works good. I usually don't use it for my stuff, but I just want to point it out that it's there. So once you're in the 3D mode, to exit it, just so you know how to exit this, you have, the way that I usually do it is if you go to the window and you have workspaces, it automatically changes to 3D. So you can go back to photography. So you can see your layers and all that. And, right now you can see this little symbol on the layer that basically says 3D. Okay. So it kind of shows you that little symbol right there. So I'm going to go back on my steps because I don't want it on 3D. Okay. So that's basically how you can tell that it's a 3D type layer by that icon right there. It's something that in some case you might need it. So it's good to know how to do it. Let's see, what else can I show you from the type? I think from the type, that's mostly it since we already covered a lot. But one thing I want to show you is if you go to the back, talk about shapes, one of the things that you're going to need is you need to divide this postcard because usually you have the stamp, and the things that you write on the postcard. So you can do a little square if you want for the stamp so people know where to put the stamp. So I'm just grabbing basically from this drop-down menu. You might have it in a different area in your toolbar, but it's the rectangular tool right here, okay? And once you get that, you can have the fill to be at none by having the diagonal line. And then the stroke, I want the black, but I want a really thin line. So I want to make sure I do, I don't know, let's do it manually, 0.75. So that way it's tiny, but not too tiny, so it can be visible. You can also change the color to like a gray, so that way it's not, let's see, let's do CMYK. No, grayscale. Let's do something like that. So it's like visible, but not overwhelming. And you can put like your little square here. One thing that I do when I'm doing this, if you started dragging it out and you're like, oh, that's not the position where I want it. If you hit just space bar, you can keep dragging it and move it along to the area. Now, we talk a little bit about where our design was going to be, right? So if I go here and I zoom in, I want to let you know that, let me hide all this. I have a gap here because I already mentioned that where it's going to get cut is basically through here and here, right? So I left a little gap, but you could, if you wanted to, put it all the way here if you wanted that close, right? Because it's going to be cut here. Now, I have learned from experience that I try to put anything that matters to me, not touching this line. I actually put it a little bit in. If it's type or something like this. Now, if it's something of the design and I have a line going in, I don't care if it gets cut or if it goes to here. But this, because it's basically where the stamp is going to be on the postcard, I want to make sure that is, not too close to the edge. I want to make sure that it has some breathing space. So that's why I moved it over there. So if you do that, then you know that you have this area where people can write or stuff like that, and usually they design, on this area, the type or the text. There's no, nowadays with technology and how people deal with social media, people break all the rules of the traditional postcard and the back. You do have to have, an area to put the stamp and the address and all that. But some people I've seen that they kind of go over and they just tape the label here or whatever, and they don't care. But I think since we're in Photoshop and we're designing it, you have to be mindful how this space is going to look, in comparison with the front. So whatever you do on the front of the design has to also be communicated on the back. So the colors, the type that you use, the elements that you put in here, you can go, also on these, shapes right here, and you can add a line if you want, for writing, if that's something that you want. You don't have to do this, but usually what I do, let me go back so you can see what I'm doing. If I just make that line, I usually just duplicate it to make sure that it's the same length. Okay, so that way I can move it. You can hold Option and drag it down, and it will be a copy of it. And something that's cool in Photoshop now and Illustrator too, like it will tell you when the gap is the same length, and then you can let go, and that way these two gaps are the same. So that's really easy to do. If you want to do, the lines, you can just drag it, and then you see it tells you right there, oh yeah, all of these gaps are exactly the same. So you can just do your lines relatively quickly. Okay, so let's say you want something like that. I don't know. This is not what you need to do. I'm just giving you ideas of how you can design your back. You don't have to have a line. I've seen people that put lines vertically. That's something else that you can do. For example, it can be a design like something visual that separates these two areas. So that way the person can know that this is the area that, there's going to be some of your design, and this is the area that they write, right? So that's the back and that's the front. Now, I don't have any guidelines on what exactly I'm expecting. The one thing that I definitely expect from all of you is that the sizing is the same, right? So the 6.25 by 4.25 is basically the size that I want. And inside that size, you can do anything you want. The things that I do require is that you have to have some type, you have to have some shapes, right? All the things that we covered in the previous demo has to be applied on this design. Now you can have your own photographs. I'm expecting you to have an image. So in the way that you design the postcard, it's totally up to you. Okay, so you can get really creative in what you want to do for this postcard and all the elements that you can use. The main thing that I wanted to show you today was basically the guidelines, how to do those, and how to have the document be the correct dimension, and how to think about the backside and how you're going to do it. So the first thing would be to create the document with all the dimensions and the guides, and then duplicate it and have the back, and make sure that you write the title front and back, so that way you don't get confused which one is which. Okay. Besides that, I want you to have some fun, and if you have questions, you can ask me later, or you can ask me by email. So I hope that you can enjoy this project, since it's really open for you to really explore the possibilities of what you can do from everything that you have learned so far. So you have to do this and the poster. The poster is exactly the same rules that I just talked about apply. If it's an 11 by 17, you're going to go File, New, and you're going to make the poster. If it's 11, you're going to do 11.25, and then the height, well, I'm assuming it's a vertical poster, it's going to be 17.25. Okay, so the same thing will apply for this one. And once you write all this and you make sure that there's 300, you're going to create it, and it's going to be your poster. And you do the same thing, the guides and all that. And now for this one, you can get really creative, because there is no constraint on what, for example, the postcard has like some constraints of what a postcard is, right? You have the front, you have the back, it has to have a stamp. So you have to think about the postcard in more functional terms. Now the posters don't have any constraint. You can do whatever you want on a poster, so you can get really creative with this one. So I'm expecting to see really cool posters from you all. So I'm looking forward to see what you guys will make, and I'll see you next time. Thank you very much.